Good morning. It is so good to be able to join you live from the sanctuary. As we settle into our time of worship together for this month's Soul Matters service, I offer these words by Unitarian Universalist President, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. May they help center our minds and hearts on this month's theme of what it means to be a people of commitment. We sometimes wrongly say it is the absence of a creed that is most important to who we are as Unitarian Universalists. This is wrong. Any one of us could practice religious freedom at home on Sunday mornings. We could practice religious freedom all day, every day, and never come into community. It is covenant that brings us out of isolation, covenant that brings us out of selfish concerns, out of individualism, to join ourselves to something greater, to become part of a community that is working to practice love, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and wisdom together, to find better ways to live our lives and live in the world. So come, my friends, come and enter into community, and with these words in our hearts, let's worship together.
Good morning. The special music that I'd like to sing for you today is a work that was actually written originally as an instrumental piece by Ennio Morricone for the movie The Mission. Sarah Brightman basically stalked him and got him to agree to convert it into a vocal performance piece. The lyrics are in Italian, so I thought I would read a translation before I sang the work for you. Nella Fantasia is the name of the song. Here's the translation. In my imagination, I see a fair world where everyone lives in peace and honesty. I dream of souls that are always free, like the clouds that fly, full of humanity in the depths of the soul. In my imagination, I see a bright world where even at night there is less darkness. I dream of souls that are always free, like the clouds that fly, full of humanity. In my imagination, there is a warm wind that breathes on the cities like a friend. I dream of souls that are always free, like the clouds that fly, full of humanity in the depths of the soul. I hope you enjoy it.
Fantasia, io vendo un mondo giusto, lì tutti vivono in pace e onestà. Io sogno d'anime che sono sempre libere, come le nuvole che volano pian d'umanità. In fondo nella fantasia io vedo un mondo chiaro e anche la notte meno oscura. Io sogno
Good morning. The flaming chalice is the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light it with me at this time. As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to build a Unitarian Universalist community that transforms lives and empowers people to serve the world. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. Our opening hymn this morning is 347, Gather the Spirit. I invite you all to sing along at home. Hello, I am Jenny Meyer, and if you're visiting us for the first time this morning, I'd like to offer you a very special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. That means whoever you are and wherever you are on your religious journey, you are welcome here. That also means that as Unitarian Universalists, we seek wisdom and inspiration from many sources, but affirm our own individual experience and conscience as the best authority of our beliefs. That also means we're committed to making our world more compassionate and just, and hope you might join us in our efforts to do so. If you're new to us, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at uufr.org/visitor form. And if you do this, you'll start receiving the Chalice, which is our weekly e-newsletter. Now I'd like to invite everybody to read through the Chalice this week to find out everything that's happening at UUFR. Please feel free to also join us for our social hour immediately after service, and there are some instructions on how to do this on our website. And even though we can't greet each other this morning in person, at this time, I'd like to invite each of you to greet each other using the chat function on your screen.
I am Trish Shagden, your Family Ministry Director. Each month, we explore a different Soul Matters theme through small group ministry, worship, and family programming. Today's service is all about our March theme, Commitment. I'd like to tell you the story, The Agreement by Barry Lopez. Once upon a time, before there were any people walking around in this valley, there were bears. They had an agreement with the salmon. The salmon would come upriver every autumn, and the bears would acknowledge this and take only what they needed. This is the way it was with everything. Everyone lived by certain agreements and courtesies, but the salmon and the bears had made no agreement with the river. It had been overlooked. No one thought it was really necessary. Well, it was. One day the river pulled itself back into the shore trees and wouldn't let the salmon enter from the ocean. Whatever they would try, the river would pull back and leave the salmon stranded on the beach. There was a long argument, a lot of talk, and finally the river let the salmon enter. But when the salmon got up into the country where the bears lived, the river began to run in two different directions all at once, north on one side, south on the other, roaring, heaving white water and rolling big boulders up onto the banks. Then the river was suddenly still. The salmon were afraid to move. The bears were stranded behind trees, looking out. The river said in the middle of all this silence that there had to be an agreement. No one could just do whatever they wanted. No one could take someone else for granted. For several days, they spoke about it. The salmon spoke of who they were and where they came from, and the bears spoke about what they did and the powers they'd been given. And the river spoke about its agreements with the rain and the wind and the crayfish and so on. Everybody said what they needed, and everyone said what they would give away. Then a very odd thing happened. The river said it loved the salmon. No one had ever said anything like that before. No one had taken this chance. It was an honesty that pleased everyone, and it made for a very deep agreement among them. Well, they were able to reach an understanding about their obligations to each other, and everyone went their way. This remains unchanged. Time has nothing to do with this. This is not just a story. When you feel the river shuddering against your legs, you are feeling the presence of all these agreements. All things are part of a great common life, and our needs and ways of being are connected. For us to partake fully in the common life we share, we have to make agreements or promises with one another about how we'll be together so that no one's taken for granted or overlooked. In our tradition, those agreements or promises are called covenants. We can make covenants with other people, with other creatures, or even with life itself, covenanting or promising to prioritize each other's well-being. And when we make and work hard every day to keep those covenants, that is one way that we are being a people of commitment. I am sending you so much love.
This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and the sorrows of our community. If you would like to share an individual joy or sorrow, I'd invite you to do so now using the chat function on your screen. This morning, Reverend James and I wish all of our Jewish members, friends, and neighbors a very happy Passover. Passover started last night and will continue through April 4th. This morning, we also join with many other people around the world in celebrating the International Transgender Day of Visibility, which is coming up on March 31st. To all of our transgender members, friends, and neighbors, we are so grateful for your presence in our lives and in our communities and your contributions to the world. And we lit a candle today as well to honor the 10 people whose lives were taken from them far too early during the shooting at a grocery store in Boulder earlier this week. The Boulder shooting was the first and worst of 12 mass shootings this past week that together claimed 20 lives. We hold the families of those lost, all of those injured, and all affected by gun violence in our hearts, and we pray for the collective will to put an end to the wanton destruction of lives. And as we reflect on all of our shared joys and sorrows, as well as the joys and sorrows and fears and hopes of our own lives, let's be together now for a time of stillness and silence, opening ourselves up to that spirit within us, between us, and amidst us, called by many names but known to every human heart, that leads us toward a fuller experience of life. After the silence, we will sing hymn number 1009, Meditation on Breathing. But now let's be together in stillness and in silence.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Friends, UUFR's annual generosity campaign has begun. If you have not already done so, I encourage you to watch a 10-minute video about everything that UUFR has been doing since the pandemic began, both among our members and friends in the wider community. Many of you have already watched this video. I also encourage you to fill out either a pledge card or an online pledge form for the coming year, which starts in July by the end of this month, March 31st. 179 of you have already done so. You can do both of these things by clicking on the box on the front page of our website at www.uufr.org about this year's generosity campaign. And now it's time for this morning's offering. We try to make being generous as convenient as possible. So I invite you to see the instructions that will appear on your screen during our offertory. Please be generous. Thank you.
Sing God a simple song, louder, louder. Make it up as you go along, louder, louder. Sing like you like to sing. God loves all simple things, for God is the simplest of all. For God is the simplest of all. I will sing the Lord a new song to praise will sing his praises while I live all of my days. Blessed is the one who loves the Lord. Blessed is the one who praises him. Louder, 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 and walks in his ways. I will lift up my eyes to the hills from whence comes my help. I will lift up my voice to the Lord, singing louder, louder. For the Lord is my shade, is the shade upon my right hand, and the sun shall not smite me by day, nor the moon by night. Blessed is the one who loves the Lord. Louder, 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 and walks in his way. Louder, 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 dee-dee-dee-day. All of my days.
Our reading this morning is from Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 34. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that he had answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is the first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength.' The second is this, 'You shall love your neighbor as yourself.' There is no other commandment greater than these." Then the scribe said to him, "You are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and beside him there is no other. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as yourself. This is much more important than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." After that, no one dared to ask him any question.
Hear, O Israel, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. A longer version of the words we heard in this morning's reading can be found in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus tells the story, a wisdom story, to illustrate what it means to love God, self, and neighbor. We call this story the Good Samaritan. The story goes that once upon a time, a man was attacked by robbers while traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. The robbers stole even the clothes on the man's back and left him close to death on the side of the road. A priest and a temple worker each chanced upon him, but instead of stopping to help, they ignored him and passed by on the other side. Finally, a third man, a Samaritan, arrived at the scene. Unlike the previous two travelers, the Samaritan was moved by compassion to care for the wounded man. The Samaritan tended the man's wounds with his own hands and placed him on his own donkey, then brought him to an inn to care for him overnight. Finally, when the Samaritan had to leave the next day, he gave the innkeeper 2 days' worth of his own wages to pay for whatever the wounded man might need in his absence, and promised to return to check on him. Loving our neighbors means making the commitment to roll up our sleeves and give of ourselves for their well-being. We human beings make many commitments. We dedicate ourselves to all kinds of things. We make promises all the time. Lovers dedicate themselves to one another, perhaps even marrying and exchanging wedding vows to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Parents commit to caring for their children from birth to young adulthood, and let's be honest, really for life. Every parent, after all, knows their child remains their child whether they are 6 or 56. Parents may promise to read to their children every single night, even when daddy has had a long day and is really tired. Or a mommy might make a commitment to leave work early enough to attend her child's soccer game or piano recital without fail. And speaking of work, an employee may make a commitment to get a project done by a deadline, even if it means putting in extra hours. A coworker may commit to supporting their colleague on a project, doing their part no matter what it takes because their coworker is counting on them. Students at school may commit to getting A's or B's in order to play on the basketball team or get into the college of their choice. Teachers may commit to grading papers with care by Monday so the kids don't have to wait. Administrators may commit to creating a robust COVID safety plan and policies so that students can attend school in person with less risk. And here at church, too, we make many commitments. About half of our congregation has taken Living the Pledge to End Racism, a class which involves doing just that, making a commitment to do our part as individuals and as a community to confront and dismantle systemic racism. You can sign up now if you have not already done so for our next class if you would like to join us by making and living your own pledge to end racism. And as many of you know, from our announcements earlier, we're nearing the end of our generosity campaign. Our generosity campaign is a brief period of time each year when we make or renew our financial commitments to help support this congregation for the upcoming year, so that it will be here for us when we need it. As we say most Sundays, those financial commitments help this community to not only survive, but thrive. We human beings really do make countless commitments. But sometimes it's hard to keep some of our commitments. Our promises make demands on us that are at times difficult to meet. Now and then our commitments conflict with one another, and that can create problems. I binge-watched a television show called Zero Chill the other day. In the show, a teenage girl sat down with her friend's mom for a conversation about the commitments that we make. Her friend's mom said, "I'm going to tell you a secret, something every parent knows. When you have a child, you make two promises: to always keep them safe, and to always want the best for them. And we would rather die than break those promises. But the truth is, keeping one always means breaking the other." Other times, having too many commitments all at once can make it hard for us to keep our priorities in order. We may find ourselves committing to shallow or selfish things while not attending to more important things. This doesn't make us evil, but human. Human beings are finite in our energies and fallible in the choices that we make. In the story of the Good Samaritan, it's tempting, I know, for us to villainize the priest and the temple worker. Both of them abandoned an injured man. How horrible. But I imagine that these two men were not more evil than the average person. I imagine them as people juggling multiple commitments who messed up royally when it really mattered. They were traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, a 17-mile journey. Most likely their religious duties were back where they had left in Jerusalem, and now they were headed home. Perhaps they were in a hurry. Maybe the priest had a sermon to write. Maybe the temple worker needed to hurry home for a family dinner. And so they passed by the injured man and did not stop. Maybe they hoped someone else would take care of him so that they would not be delayed. More likely, though, the priest and the temple worker feared checking on the man because he might have been dead. Their culture at that time taught that dead bodies were unclean. Checking on the man meant risking contact with a body that might be dead. They wouldn't be able to enter the temple for a time. That would mean it would be very hard to keep their religious commitments as a priest and as a temple worker. And none of this makes it okay. But there are times when we all get our commitments upside down, when we all pour our efforts into one thing while neglecting something more important and cause harm along the way. Commitments involve risk and sacrifice. They require skin in the game, and that's hard. We give up some of our inner resources, our material possessions, our limited time, and our other pursuits for our commitments. That's what it means to commit, to give something to a cause. No wonder we sometimes avoid following through. And there are times when we are pulled in so many different directions by all of our commitments that we find it hard to do anything at all. When I was in grad school, we could participate in something called a winter intensive. Winter intensives were a week long with an emphasis on long, and they were called intensives for a reason. That year, I was a full-time student and also worked full-time, and it was brutal, but I was determined to do both and to get good grades while doing it, no matter what. And so I ignored my body's pleas for rest. A minor sniffle turned into a bad chest cold, and then pneumonia as I hammered away at work and homework. I failed to include a commitment to my own health alongside my commitments to work and school. And so I ended up having to miss some work and some school to attend to my health. Sometimes we spread ourselves so thin, we struggle to follow through on all of our commitments. However, true commitment doesn't mean that we have to burn ourselves up or use ourselves up. We're not called to crucify ourselves for our commitments. Self-destructive sacrifice is not expected of us. I know that the wisdom of the ancients we heard today seems to ask this of us, at least on the surface. Love God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's one tall order. How are we supposed to give everything to the divine, all that we are, all that we've got, and still have anything left over to give our neighbors, let alone ourselves? But I don't think that passage was meant to be taken as a command to sacrifice ourselves in one dramatic show of utter devotion. I don't think it's asking us to become martyrs for the cause. After all, we are capable of a whole lot more good over the course of our whole lifetimes than in most individual moments. But it's hard to do anything good at all if we're burned out or even dead. Our reading this morning calls us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Often we think this statement is about how we should commit to treating other people, and rightly so. But it is also about how we should commit to treating ourselves. We should love ourselves as much as we love our neighbors. And I don't mean love as a feeling, whether warm fuzzies or burning passion. I know that for some of us, especially if we suffer from depression or emotional abuse, it can be really hard to feel love for ourselves, to feel that we are worthy or worth the effort to love. When I say we should love ourselves as much as we love our neighbors, I mean that we should commit to using our energies to actively pursue our own deepest well-being as much as the well-being of others. As Michelle Obama says, we need to do a better job of putting ourselves higher on our own to-do list. We need to remember that we are a part of our own circle of care. We are one of our own neighbors. We do deserve care, whether it is self-care or the loving care of others. We do not have to choose between our own well-being and our many commitments to do right by others. The Samaritan in the story knew how to prioritize his commitment to help the injured man and his other commitments. He took care of the man overnight, but he did not stay longer. He ensured that the injured man would be cared for, and then he departed, presumably to complete his journey to Jericho and whatever business awaited him there. And he gave 2 days' worth of wages to pay for the man's care, but not all that he possessed. He clearly could give more. He told the innkeeper that he would provide more if it turned out that more was needed. But for the time being, he provided to the best of his knowledge of what the injured man's care required and kept the rest for whatever he personally needed it for. And he cared for the man after the robbers attacked, but he did not go out and try to find the robbers and bring them to justice so that other travelers would not be hurt. He did not sacrifice his own safety, even though he perhaps could have. Instead, he did that hard work of finding a way to balance multiple commitments rather than sacrificing himself for others. He found a way to care for an injured man, to complete the journey he'd interrupted to care for the man, and to protect his own well-being by staying away from the robbers all at once. We don't have to give everything we've got to our every commitment, and in doing so, sacrifice ourselves. But there is one thing we should give ourselves to fully, one commitment we should make. If we love the source of life itself with all of our heart and all of our soul, all of our strength and all of our mind, that deep commitment will guide us in managing all our other commitments. When we prioritize that which is life-giving above all else, our commitment to nurturing life's great abundance will flow into all of our other commitments. Again, love is not a feeling, it is a way of relating. Love is a way of relating that pursues the well-being of love's recipient. Ancient wisdom calls us to love God with everything we've got. And there are many different understandings of the divine in this congregation. But for right now, I invite you to imagine the divine as that which gives life. Not just life such as coming into being and being alive, but all the things that make life good. As that which nurtures and defends life, as that which renews life. Imagine that is what we mean when we use the word God. We arose from life itself. The first moment we drew breath, we inherited the abundance of life as our natural birthright. We are surrounded by life. We are part of a great common life that includes all beings, from ants to humans to humpback whales. When we understand the divine this way, loving God with all of our being means actively seeking the well-being of life itself. It means seeking to enlarge the common life so that all may partake fully. It means using our capacities to help give, nurture, defend, and transform life for the good. Loving life itself with all of our being means being committed in body, mind, heart, and spirit to that which gives and nurtures and protects and renews life. It means focusing our energies on being life's channel, co-creator, caretaker, and champion as we move through the world. And when we take up that commitment, it will inform all of the other commitments that we make, inspiring us to seek whatever is most life-giving for ourselves and others in our every commitment. I believe that that's what the Samaritan did when he wandered into that dire scene in the mountains between Jerusalem and Jericho. I believe he asked himself, what is the most life-affirming thing I can do here right now? I believe he looked at his neighbor lying injured there on the road and thought about his own journey and needs and decided to show his love for his neighbor, for God, and for himself by asking himself how he could pour himself out in body, mind, heart, and spirit, then and there, in the way he sought the most life-giving path for them all. When we are faced with a difficult decision, when we encounter a situation where multiple commitments seem to conflict with one another and we must make choices, we can pause and do likewise. We can say to ourselves, I want all of us to have life and to have it abundantly. So what path will help all of us partake to the fullest extent possible right now in the great common life? How can I be an instrument here and now for life-giving, life-sustaining, life-transforming power? And then once we decide, we must act, commit. I love the way that Greek scholar and anti-racist activist Clarence Jordan talks about this idea in Cotton Patch Parables of Liberation. He wrote, "We are God's new farming partners, and we are scattering seeds of mercy that will eventually grow and nourish all of our friends and enemies alike." My friends, life is inviting us into relationship. Life is calling us to revel in the great common life. Life is encouraging us to envision a world in which we and our neighbors alike may partake fully of life's bounty. Life is asking us to be co-creators of life's abundance. May our hearts open wide to that invitation. May our souls hear that call. May our minds hold the vision. May our strength pour into creative action. Let us say yes to life. Our closing hymn today is number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. I invite you along.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with
I hope that you will join us for social hour in one of our Zoom rooms after the service. It is time now for us to extinguish this flame and bring today's service to a close. Let's end with the words of the American poet and artist Brian Andreas. Say yes. Whatever it is, say yes with your whole heart. And simple as it sounds, that's all the excuse life needs to grab you by the hands and start to dance. Amen, and blessed be.